Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Stephen DeLuca, and I am with the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking. The name of this parallel event is Innovative and Intersectional Approaches to Disrupting Human Trafficking. We are honored to be joined by participants from around the world and to have an opportunity to host our first parallel event when we can celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Commission on the Status of Women, the 50th anniversary of this NGO forum, and the 10th anniversary of our coalition. For those of you who are not familiar with the topic, human trafficking is defined by international conventions and national and state laws. While each law is different, the common definition is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of forced labor or sexual exploitation. For more than 2 centuries, the international community has condemned slavery, and it has been recognized as an ergo omnes obligation of nation states to prosecute such criminals regardless of where they committed these acts and regardless of where their victims are found. It has been outlawed in the United States since the passage of the 13th Amendment more than 150 years ago. And yet there are tens of millions of victims of human trafficking today, far more than during the entire transatlantic slave trade. The international community has condemned human trafficking through the passage of the Palermo Protocol and other global and regional instruments, and by the passage of national laws and regulations as well. This includes the Comprehensive Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000 and its amendments in the United States, as well as state laws, such as New Jersey's 2013 Human Trafficking Law. Reports on trafficking in persons are published regularly by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime and the US State Department. The New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking was formed in 2011. Its mission is to unite the state's communities to end human trafficking. The coalition does this by organizing speaking events, outreach, educational programs, and public policy advocacy. It has over 15 active committees, an operating council, a board of trustees, an executive committee, and a survivor leader advisory council. The coalition is fully volunteer run and coordinates statewide community efforts to bring an end to sex and labor trafficking in New Jersey. It has over 200 volunteers and more than 100 affiliated organizations, including NGOs, faith-based organizations, academics, law enforcement, and direct service providers. We use a survivor-inclusive approach to all that we do. We employ a survivor consultant and have a survivor leader advisory council, and we compensate them so they are not exploited once again. We work with key professional groups, including healthcare providers, first responders, and hospital staff, to ensure protocols are in place to recognize and prevent human trafficking and to safely identify and treat those who have suffered from it. We also advocate for statewide and national legislation that protects survivors, identifies victims, and reduces demand for future victims. New Jersey was one of the first 2 states in the country to create a comprehensive legislative framework for combating human trafficking in 2013. And it has worked since then to improve this legislation and federal law as well, such as the current bill for the reauthorization of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. Today, we have 5 panelists who will discuss how the coalition employs a survivor-inclusive approach to the legislative, policy, and educational opportunities it has spearheaded, which empower women and girls. We will first discuss a whole university approach to being active participants in healing survivors through a comprehensive pre-arrest diversion program, which disrupts the sex traffickers' supply of victims. This approach provides wraparound services to primarily women and girls, including free legal, medical, dental, and mental health services, plus training, housing, and educational opportunities. We are confident that such a program exists nowhere else, but that it can be replicated worldwide. We will begin with a professor who spearheaded the Pre-Arrest Diversion program, then one of our legislative advocates who has worked on several policy initiatives, particularly the expansion of the vacatur provision in New Jersey's human trafficking law. And we will hear from our survivor consultant about what it means for us to be survivor inclusive. We will also hear from the president of the Board of Trustees, as well as our executive director, to further discuss the coalition's efforts to bring an end to human trafficking and our vision and outlook for the future of the coalition. Each panelist will speak for about 12 to 15 minutes, and at the end, we will have time for questions and answers. First, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Stephen DeLuca, and I will be your moderator for today. I have been working on human trafficking issues since 2006. I serve on the Coalition's Board of Trustees and as co-chair of its Operating Council. I am a lawyer working on complex litigation and regulatory matters relating to international trade, finance, and banking. I earned my SJD from Tulane, and last year I completed the winter online courses at the Hague Academy. I have taught the International Law Seminar. I'm a published author and an editor-in-chief of an international law review. I clerked for a U.S. judge for the Court of International Trade. Our first panelist is Professor Penny Venetis. She is the director of the International Human Rights Clinic at Rutgers Law School. Professor Venetis is an expert in civil rights law and international human rights law, and she pioneered efforts to integrate international law into United States law. She has worked on human trafficking issues for nearly 3 decades. She is the Distinguished Clinical Professor of Law at Rutgers, where she has pioneered innovative survivor-based anti-trafficking programs that lead to long-term systemic change. She will speak on the pre-arrest diversion program she developed to disrupt traffickers' supply of victims and provide wraparound services for survivors, primarily women and girls. Penny?
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Stephen. And I really am delighted to be speaking today at this very, very important event, and to also focus our eyes for a moment on human trafficking, which impacts both boys and girls, men and women, and people who are gender fluid. It impacts everybody regardless of their gender identity, regardless of their socioeconomic position, and it is still a global scourge. Human trafficking is modern day slavery. It is the savage abuse of treating a human being like a commodity, treating a human being like a body that serves only to make money for someone else. While we still have a very, 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 very long way to go since the Palermo Protocol was signed, nations across the world have at least acknowledged that human trafficking is a global human rights violation, and have committed to taking action to stop it. Besides the Palermo Protocol, other treaties and domestic laws exist that require countries and regional and local governments to combat trafficking. And, as a result of that, professionals have emerged around the world to provide services for trafficking survivors. And I want to focus our attention on those services and the work that we're doing here in New Jersey, and focused at Rutgers University, where I am a faculty member. It takes a village to help a trafficking survivor heal, to help a trafficking survivor, try and integrate into the world after being abused in the most horrific way imaginable. Across the globe, mental health professionals, doctors, lawyers, social workers, social service providers, trafficking survivors, and other talented and committed individuals have come up with different ways of helping trafficking survivors heal. And there are many, many successful programs around the world, which we have studied at Rutgers University, and actually have taken the best out of those successful programs to come up with an umbrella program that can be administered incredibly efficiently, both from a services provided and also from a financial perspective. And also we believe it can be replicated around the world, as Stephen mentioned. Our program is a pre-arrest diversion program. And the premise of that is that unfortunately, many trafficking victims are still arrested by the police, and many trafficking survivors have crippling criminal histories that prevent them from gaining employment, from securing housing, from being with their family members. And if those criminal arrests and the threat of prosecution exists, then it is virtually impossible for a trafficking victim or survivor to move on and try to break away from the trafficker and actually reintegrate into society. So the notion is that we have to reach trafficking victims before they actually are processed through the criminal legal system. Because once that happens, then a system that's supposed to be protecting them is actually trying to prosecute them and put them in jail. And no trafficking victim and survivor would, sort of open up or trust that system. So the key is to work with law enforcement to keep trafficking victims outside of the criminal legal system and divert them to a program that can help them heal, leave trafficking, and become integrated into society in the way that the survivor and victim feels is best for them. So I am a faculty member, a senior faculty member at Rutgers University, which is the State University of New Jersey. It is a major research institute. And the benefit of working in a major research institute is not only that we can test new theories and new programs, but also that I have access to other professionals, other academics, other thinkers who work with on issues related to trauma and efforts to work with trafficking victims and survivors. So the key is that, after spending a year studying different programs, we found that no one system works as well as it should. And that's because every survivor or victim needs something different. Whether some people have serious medical needs, right? They suffer from diseases, or they have illnesses related to their trafficking. Others need extensive psychological support. Some people need more psychological support than others. Folks have dental needs, which are often overlooked. Folks have legal needs that are almost always overlooked by many programs that, as I mentioned earlier, you really can't move on with your life if the threat of prosecution is hanging over your head, you can't, perhaps you're separated from your children, or you could be deported, or you simply cannot get an apartment or housing because you have convictions on your record. So in the US, which is what I'm familiar with, most social services have a beginning, obviously a beginning, but an end. You get 6 weeks of counseling, or you get, a limited basket of services, and it's the same for everyone. And that makes sense. It's easier to administer a program like that. But the problem is that doesn't always work, and that we have found that the best programs are ones that tailor services to the individual needs of every trafficking victim and survivor. So we started this pre-arrest diversion program so that we can get people before they enter the criminal legal system, before they become alienated and more dependent on their traffickers, and to divert these victims and survivors into a system that exists under the umbrella of a major research university where we, I and my colleagues at the medical school, at the dental school, at the social work school, we already all have a vast experience working with trauma victims, victims of survivors, survivors of trafficking, domestic violence, and intimate partner survivors. So we have the expertise, and it's really kind of consolidating all of our energies to help trafficking survivors and trafficking victims. And because we already do all of this work in our individual departments, we don't have to hire anyone new. We can just make sure that we integrate this work into the work that we already do, so that people get the services that they need. And some person, as I said earlier, may need have a tremendous amount of legal needs. They may have 50 convictions, and we've worked with people who fall into that category, and they have to expunge those convictions. Other people may not have any convictions. Some people may need 3 years of mental health support. Other people may need 6 months of mental health support. The program actually realizes that every person needs something else. There is no end period to our program. We also, through our social work school, have the ability to coordinate efforts so that the trafficking victim and survivor does not have to do this. It's a full-time job for someone to go from one place to another to coordinate meetings. And some providers, if somebody misses 1 or 2 meetings, they can't offer the services anymore. In our system, we have our School of Social Work that coordinates the efforts and actually make sure that somebody has the resources and the ability to travel within the university setting, which is in 1 or 2 physical places, to get all of the services that they need. And again, I mentioned dental care earlier. It's often neglected when we're talking about support services for trafficking survivors. It is hard to get a job if you have serious dental problems. It's hard to eat if you have serious dental problems. And again, it's usually low on the list or non-existent whatsoever on the list for services provided to trafficking victims and survivors. And we also believe that legal needs are also critical, and they're often not provided. The additional benefit of being within a university system is, again, everything is provided under one umbrella. There's no competition between the various departments. Everybody works together. Everybody can contribute their expertise. And the other thing is that for survivors, they also can get job training within the university setting. If they can work with our various language and teaching colleges to get language skills if they don't speak English well. And again, all of these services are available if faculty members recommend folks to be part of the educational institution, then that carries a lot of weight. We also have an incredible program at Rutgers University, one of the first universities in the nation to do this, where we actually have a set program for former offenders who have served time in prison, reentry program. So that program is already established. It's part of the services offered under the umbrella. So there's already a framework there, right? We don't have to go outside of the system. We don't have to consult with experts. We have that internally. So it really is a way, again, we want to approach every person as if they're the only participant in the program and make sure that they thrive through the various services offered through the university. The other good thing about this program is that we train the next generation of professionals who can work with victims and survivors to go elsewhere and maybe replicate the program, but certainly are trained to deal with this very, very vulnerable population. We are hoping, and part of the plan is that this will be survivor-led and survivor-informed. Once folks have the desire and the ability, once they've healed enough to work within the program, they will be the advisors to the program. The program also contemplates a constant reevaluation and constant study to make sure that we are operating as effectively as possible, which is where we will depend on our survivor colleagues and peers to, as well as looking at data and monitoring the progress of members who come through the program. We also, being part of a major research university, we also have the ability to engage in legislative reform. And that is something that the New Jersey Anti-Trafficking Coalition already does. And members of the coalition that you'll be hearing from shortly also engage in. So it's really, again, we have the muscle of the university behind us. And the beauty of this program is that it's not something that can only exist in New Jersey. This can be replicated at every university around the country. It can be replicated at every university around the world. And again, it's really a consolidation of people who are a recognition that there are people within the university settings who have the expertise that's needed to really provide tailored programs so that folks can heal. And again, we call ours, the basis is a pre-arrest diversion program to get people out of the criminal legal system that causes more harm than good. We don't want anyone to have to go through the criminal legal system to be convicted when they don't have to. It really is recognizing that folks can be diverted into this program where they can heal and become productive members of society, and they can, as best as is humanly possible, they can try and sort of move on from being having been trafficked. I'm very happy to discuss this with anyone. If you have any questions, I see in the chat that folks are asking questions, but I'll be happy to answer them after my colleagues have spoken. And thank you again for allowing us to present this important program.
Thank you very much, Penny. In the meantime, someone has asked if you can provide a link to the program so they can forward it. If you can put that in the chat while we move on, that would be great.
Okay, I'll just put my email address. I think that makes a lot of sense. We'll
However way you want to get it to
yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Penny. Our next panelist is Jessica Kittson. She is the Director of Legal Advocacy at Volunteer Lawyers for Justice in Newark, New Jersey. Ms. Kittson is a national expert on advocacy for human trafficking survivors. She heads VLJ's New Jersey Human Trafficking Victims Legal Assistance Program, and she is a faculty consultant with the National Survivor Reentry Project. She will speak principally on the vacatur expansion law that was recently passed and signed into law in New Jersey and which she authored. Jessica?
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here today and joining us while we talk about all of these issues. I see somebody put in a Q&A, which is appropriate for what I'm about to talk about. Why are victims going through the legal system at all? It's a really good question, right? And to provide a little bit of context about what we've been working on in New Jersey, I think, a common misconception is that when we think of human trafficking survivors and when we think about how they are interacting with the criminal legal system, we assume that that is always in the context of their their status as a victim. And while certainly that is true some of the time, it is absolutely not true all of the time. And far too often, survivors themselves are criminalized, the consequences of which can be absolutely devastating, both in the immediate sense and the trauma that they experience, and certainly in terms of long-term consequences. And so to give a little bit of background, the National Survivor Network in 2016 did a survey of trafficking survivors. And what they found is that 91% of the respondents of the survey indicated that they had been arrested at some point. Over 50% reported that every arrest on their record was trafficking related. 42% had been arrested as minors. Over 40% reported being arrested over 9 times or more, and 60% reported being arrested for crimes other than prostitution, which is really important and key to what I want to talk about in terms of the New Jersey work. And what does that look like? So, right, so I think we've gotten more attention to the fact that there's a lot of prostitution charges happening for survivors of sex trafficking. Even for those sex trafficking survivors, though, we have a number, we see every day survivors who have convictions for things like theft or drug offenses, weapons charges, things like that. But another important part of that is that it's not just sex trafficking survivors who can be arrested and who can have interactions with the criminal legal system. Labor trafficking survivors also do that. And so we want to make sure that our laws and our services and our protections are recognizing that and providing resources and relief there as well. As I mentioned, the consequences of these interactions and of these convictions and arrests are devastating for survivors. They provide real barriers to a survivor moving forward, to a survivor getting the help that they need, and to preventing re-victimization. Someone having an arrest history can impact employment, right? So background checks are very common, far too common when employers are hiring. It impacts housing, especially public housing. Education. I have had multiple clients who have been denied educational opportunities, either because they were not eligible for scholarships as a result of their records, or because they couldn't get accepted into professional programs where licensure would be an issue down the road as a result of those convictions. Public benefits can be impacted, loans, family stability, and certainly for any foreign national survivors, there can be absolutely horrific consequences in the context of somebody being able to access immigration relief in the United States if they have a record. And so with that background, I'm very happy to say that since 2013, New Jersey at the time was among a handful, we were a very early adopter of vacatur relief for survivors of trafficking. By vacatur, I mean the ability for a survivor of human trafficking to clear their criminal record by showing that the record happened as a result of being trafficked. In 2009, New York became the first state in the country to do that. New Jersey followed in 2013. I'm very pleased to report that if you look at the national map today, it is beautiful. The country has really stepped up, and most states now have some kind of relief. It is very different. It is state by state. An important footnote, we do not have a national federal vacatur law, and we need one. So do a little plug for that while I'm speaking. But what we're seeing now is states are revisiting and looking at what comes next and whether or not the relief that we have on the books is actually what we intended to do and what survivors need. And this is where the New Jersey Coalition Against Trafficking came in. And so we saw quickly that while New Jersey's law allowed for really important relief for some victims, that it was leaving people behind. And that there were far too many people who weren't going to be able to clear any of their record or could only clear some of it because New Jersey's law, as was very common for early adopting states, focused exclusively on prostitution and prostitution-related crimes, which meant that somebody who had a prostitution conviction could bring, and we have done this, I want to be really clear, lots of people have gotten relief from New Jersey's law as it is written, and that's very important. But there have been so many people who haven't been able to apply for relief because the things that are on their record go beyond prostitution, or maybe didn't connect to prostitution at all in the first place. And so the coalition, working with New Jersey lawmakers, helped to draft and then pushed to get introduced a law that dramatically improves what New Jersey's law is. And so the main things that we did in New Jersey is that we opened up the type of matters that can be cleared. We now have a law that basically says that almost any conviction on your record can be vacated as long as it was a result of the trafficking. We have 5 exceptions to the law. So there are 5 offenses that cannot currently be cleared: murder, manslaughter or aggravated manslaughter, kidnapping, luring or enticing of a child, and sexual assault. Are there survivors in this country who have those convictions? Yes, right? But for the most part, that is not what we're talking about. Most of the survivors that we are working with have far more minor convictions. And so this law is going to open up a world of possibility to countless survivors in New Jersey, and really folks across the country who have New Jersey convictions. Because one thing you should know about criminal record clearing, right, is that it is very common for folks to be moved across the country. And so this has implications for folks on the national level. In addition to clearing those open things, we've ensured that court appearances will not be required, or that if an appearance is required, virtual options remain available. It ensures that DNA that was collected as a part of it will be also vacated. It keeps things confidential, and it is moving towards a faster timeline of cases being heard. This law goes into effect on June 1st. We already have clients waiting. We have people who will be filing petitions in the state of New Jersey on June 1st because they've been waiting for years for this relief to become available. There's still more work to be done. We want to make sure that the law is going to appropriately protect for our national victims. We want to see what these cases are that we're going to bring under the new law, and make sure that there's an appropriately broad interpretation of what all of this means. We're working with the courts to make sure that fines continue to be returned, and that the timing is working out. I want to give a big shout out to the prosecutors across the state of New Jersey that we work with on these. You know, we think of the legal system as adversarial, and it is, but in this instance, we really see a very collaborative effort of all of the stakeholders coming together to protect victims and to ensure that they are getting the relief that they want. I expect that to continue now more than ever. We have prosecutors thrilled. We've had prosecutors refer cases to us. And so I think this is a really exciting time, because I think that we're going to be able to do a lot of good with this new law. I think it brings New Jersey back out to the forefront, and hopefully encouraging other states to do this work. And I want to just, you know, really congratulate everyone at the coalition who helped to make this happen. It was a big effort over many, many months, but it's going to have a real impact on day 1 of going into effect. And again, I'm also happy to take questions when we're done, but for now, that's a pretty quick overview.
Thank you, Jessica. That was excellent. And I know that it took a while to get it finally passed. We had to go through several sessions, but it was a lot of hard work, but well worth the work. So thank you. We do have some questions in the chat, and we will get to them later. In the meantime, we did put our information on how you can contact us if you have further questions. Our next panelist is Gina Cavallo. She is our survivor consultant for the coalition. She is also a speaker and an advocate for survivors and victims. Gina is the founder of the Paying It Forward Foundation in New Jersey. That foundation supports survivors of human trafficking. She was awarded the National Liberator Award as Survivor Leader in 2020. She serves on the Coalition's Board of Trustees and the New Jersey Commission on Human Trafficking. She will speak on what it means for the Coalition to use a survivor-inclusive approach to all that we do, and to elaborate on how our initiatives, which you just heard from Penny and Jessica, have impacted the lives of survivors like her. Gina?
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to this important event. First, I have so much respect for all of you and for all that you do. Without you, this didn't have a chance. Yes, we need survivors, and that's how we learn. Understanding to be survivor informed is very crucial. Although human trafficking generally affects women, it also discriminates against no one, and it comes in many forms. We are already witnessing the change. If I should stop doing this work today, the New Jersey Coalition has made a difference, a significant difference in countless of lives. Being survivor inclusive and trauma informed is bringing survivors on from the beginning of the event, from every project and every conversation. It's more than telling or hearing about survivor stories. We are bringing our expertise as a human being in our personal life, from our professional career and lived experience. We were victims who didn't ask for this to happen to us. As a survivor consultant for the New Jersey Coalition, I bring my expertise and lived experience, and the Coalition has entrusted me and it supported me to allow me to bring countless survivors throughout the states to allow their voices to be heard and giving them a platform. This has made not only our organization grow and learn and continue to educate, but also other survivor-led organizations across the US want to model what we are doing. They have already started modeling what the Coalition has been doing. In 2021, we had our last annual report. I believe it was in June. And you can hear from many survivors who wanted to model what the Coalition was doing. The initiatives that Penny and Jessica have done and continue to do are having an impact not only on my life, but countless other survivors. Yes, we are survivors and no longer a victim of this violent act of humanity against us. But for me and many others, I still live with it. It is a life sentence. The implications are having a record that affects every part of your life. It robs you from relationships, healthcare, as Penny and Jessica had said earlier, dental, jobs, housing, school, and your legal needs. Education has been one and a forefront, not only through my life where there's been a struggle, but even as much as recently. The long-term consequences of criminalization is being re-victimized over and over, while those who weren't even who they said they were. I didn't even know who my traffickers were. They told me who they were, but I didn't know they weren't who they said they were because they had different names and there was no way to track them. And I had 4 different traffickers. I ended up with arrest, but I never knew that my arrest led me and resulted in a criminal record. I didn't know until just several years ago that I had a criminal record and that I still have criminal records. And as Jessica said earlier, traffickers do move you around a lot. And they do that for a few reasons. They do it because they follow conferences, they follow Super Bowls, they follow wherever they know that they could sell us as commodity. And also as traffickers, they basically don't want to be caught. So moving their victims around a lot gives them a higher chance of not getting caught. So for me, being left with a record and was devastating. It was, I always had a struggle with some learning disabilities growing up with my education. In fact, one of the things I did excel with in school was my sense of humor and my laughter, which I received a couple of awards on. And I realized later in life that I used humor to hide behind my pain because of coming from a child abuse and domestic violence environment that led into my vulnerabilities to being trafficked. But I wanted to go back to school so badly. And when I went back to school, I was so happy. And this was only several years ago. And I had to fill out so many forms. I had a 2.5-hour interview by a couple of people. And when I was finally accepted, it was something that I didn't take lightly. So basically, I do remember what happened on my application. It did ask if I had a criminal record, and I answered no, because I had no idea I had a criminal record. And I was getting ready to go to school one evening, and I received a call, and it was a director, and she said to me I couldn't come back to school. And she said that, and when I asked her why, she said that my report came back and the secretary filed it away, so they didn't catch it in time, and that's why I was being allowed to be in school for several months. But when they did realize that I had that criminal record and she told me what it was the first time I actually heard that I had a criminal record, and it was devastating. I cannot begin to tell you the trauma and the re-traumatization that it had caused me. And it was because of the New Jersey Coalition and Volunteers for Justice Network, Jessica Kittson, and a few other people that had led me into starting the process and getting rid of it. But when I asked the director why I couldn't come back, and she told me, it was like very, very difficult. She wouldn't even give me my paperwork. She said it was confidential, but it was theirs. And then I had to go to the jail and to the county, to the sheriff's department, to redo my background check all over again. And the whole thing was just so humiliating and embarrassing. And there wasn't a hole big enough. And the thing that's really hard, it's such a hard pill to swallow, is that, I get left like many other survivors with a criminal record. And so many doors closed, but it also made me realize why other doors in my past closed, that no one was able to tell me why. I remember with my organization paying it forward back in 2012 with Hurricane Sandy, helping countless of homeowners that homes were devastated in Central and South Jersey. And I did a lot to make a difference. And homeowner after homeowner was putting my name and organization in for the Champion of Change. And I was right there to get ready to receive it. But that was another time a door closed because of my background. And so basically what happens is that we do live with this life sentence, and it's something that countless survivors have to live with, while the perpetrators, the criminals, are out there free, and we are left to have this over our heads. And it does affect every part of your life. And it's bad enough, having the memories and having this violation against humanity, and then having to be left with this. So I am thrilled that, of all your hard work and how this is and will make a difference in countless survivors' lives. And I also thank the New Jersey Coalition for their, just for being so proactive, for the education that we constantly provide, because it's the education that's bringing awareness, and all the legislative work that's being done and continues to be done. So if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at the end to the best I could. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gina. Our next panelist is Danny Papa. Danny is the president of the Coalition's Board of Trustees, and he also serves as co-chair of the Coalition's Education Committee. Mr. Papa is the principal of the Arthur Stanlick Elementary School, which is in the Jefferson Township Public School District. He also serves as an adjunct professor at East Stroudsburg University. He has an MS from Montclair State University, and he's now completing his doctorate. I believe he's all but dissertation. And so he'll be defending his dissertation soon to get his doctorate in historical studies at Drew University. Mr. Papa will speak about the Coalition's education initiatives and more broadly about what we're working on today. Danny?
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this today. I am just so humbled by the work of the coalition, and it's just such an incredible experience to just work alongside just incredible people who are just so passionate about making a lasting impact here in New Jersey and then even beyond. As an educator, I always say that passion is contagious, that students learn best from educators who are passionate, but I think that's true for anything. And if there's one way that I could sum up the New Jersey Coalition Against Human Trafficking and the people that are part of this coalition, is that everyone has such a passion to prevent this crime and to make a difference. And it's just amazing to be part of this group. So I just wanted to highlight a few innovative programs that we have really been working hard on for the last few years here in New Jersey. At the coalition, we believe that education is prevention. Education is much more than awareness. It's prevention. And if we can educate our young people, starting in elementary school, going on through middle school and high school and into college, about the risk factors and the warning signs of trafficking, about online grooming and internet safety, safety when they're playing video games and on social media, we strongly believe that is one of the most effective prevention strategies. So what we have done, I'm just going to highlight a few things, is one thing is we have a really outstanding internship program. We have college interns who during the winter recess, they apply for the program, and we usually have about 20 different interns that will intern with us in the month of December into January, and together college interns from all over the state of New Jersey, from many of the colleges and universities here, come together, and their objective and their goal is to spearhead our January 11th Awareness Day. And the last few years obviously have been virtual, and they've done such an amazing job of really bringing awareness and highlighting online grooming through the various different forms of media, whether it's gaming, social media, chat rooms, websites, and it's such an amazing group of young people. And they also have come on to different aspects and areas of leadership in the coalition, not just in the internship program, but beyond. And we're really proud of all of our college interns and the work that they're going to continue to do even beyond just the Awareness Day in January. Another program I'd like to highlight is something called Locker Slam. We're actually about to launch our 4th iteration of Locker Slam. The first 2 years, we had magnets that we created and promoted. And in the first 2 years, we had well over 90 schools, middle schools and high schools throughout the state of New Jersey that signed up for this free program, where we sent them magnets that they could put all over their schools, on lockers and doors and so on. And there were statements, but then there were also questions. And we just really believe that inquiry is a way to engage young people and to have them really think about, who am I chatting with online, and what is this issue of human trafficking? And we had some inspiring quotes as well. And obviously the 3rd year, which was last year, we created an all virtual Locker Slam, where we had virtual stickers that could be used through social media and on things like Google Classrooms and so on. And we had a number of schools sign up last year and engage in that. And we really focused on the issue of online grooming and a number of different questions, like who is the person behind the tweet, or who are you chatting with, or who is the person that's direct messaging you? Again, to really provoke and inspire young people to think very thoroughly about the way they're interacting online and who they might be interacting with. And we provided teachers with a number of different digital resources to learn more about grooming and how they can online grooming and how they can approach their students. And then this year we're about to launch our 4th iteration, which is going to have magnets, stickers, and window decals. And again, it's a free program for educators, and we're really excited about this year's program. And again, just highlighting a number of different facts and statistics and a lot of questions to prompt conversation within schools throughout the state. We are also currently putting together and working on a survivor-led and survivor-informed curriculum project here in the state of New Jersey, brand new standards are coming out in September of 22 in health and physical education. And in the 6th to 8th grade band, as well as the 9 to 12th grade band, there are some very comprehensive and detailed learning standards within New Jersey student learning standards for health and PE. And we have a curriculum project right now where we're going to create and generate very practical lessons that physical educators can use to teach these standards aligned lessons when they're teaching about human trafficking, which we're really, really excited about this project. At the coalition, our mission and vision is to unite New Jersey communities to end human trafficking. And one of the ways that we have done that from an education standpoint is in 2018, in I think it was March of 2018, a bill was introduced in the Women and Children Committee here in our assembly. And it was calling upon the Department of Education to create guidelines, comprehensive guidelines for schools to address and prevent human trafficking within our schools and to educate our young people. And we supported that legislation the whole way through and really advocated and promoted it. And we were thrilled that in the summer of 2019, Governor Murphy signed that bill into law. And myself and Kate Lee and Gina, who you've heard from, we were, as well as other members of the coalition, we were part of a pretty expansive working group that the Department of Education put together to work on these guidelines. And the guidelines were recently released about a month ago, which we're really excited about. There's a lot of time and effort that's been put into them. But we just know that, again, the education is prevention, and these guidelines are a step towards really putting into practice effective and robust strategies to educate the educators about this issue of human trafficking, as well as the ways that they could then turnkey that and educate the young people in their schools. And that's just an example of coming together with like-minded and passionate people throughout the state of New Jersey, working with the Department of Education, coming up with really comprehensive guidelines that are now going to influence and impact school districts throughout our state. So those are just a few types of strategies and ways that we're really trying to engage schools in this state. We believe that empowering teachers and empowering students is a way to use education as prevention. So thank you very much, and I'm so glad to be part of this panel today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny. That was great hearing from you. Our fifth panelist is Kate Lee. She is the coalition's executive director. Ms. Lee is a former BBC radio news and current affairs producer. And I think what's really notable is, while serving with the Junior Leagues of New Jersey's State Public Affairs Committee, she was one of the people that helped form the coalition as a founding member in 2011. She has a BA in politics from the University of Warwick, and she will speak further about the coalition and our outlook for the future. Kate?
Thanks so much, Stephen. Hello to everybody. I know it's not always the afternoon where you are. And I just want to say, it's wonderful that you have taken time to be here. I know today our global community faces just so many challenges. So it's remarkable that you want to learn about this challenge. But right now we are coming out of a pandemic. We have a war going on with millions of refugees. There's poverty, discrimination. And just to understand that all of those things create extra vulnerabilities to further suffering and exploitation. And that's really what human trafficking is about. I mean, the International Labour Organization, the ILO, has estimated that there are 25 million victims of human trafficking worldwide every day. So, and of those, 75% are women and children. So this is a very important topic for today and for this forum. You've heard a great deal about the coalition, and I want to sort of talk a little bit about what fuels our grassroots effort. It's, as you heard from Danny, it's aimed at prevention, as well as those many other efforts of justice and restitution, as outlined by Jessica and Penny and Gina. And so you'll see that our legislative efforts are part of all of that, but there are also very many ways that we have tried to involve communities to end human trafficking. And so one way you can look at what we do is what I like to sort of break it down into is our 3 R's. We like to be respectful, responsive, and relatable. So being respectful means, as you've heard from Gina, we are survivor inclusive. Gina is such an amazing asset to us. She has created our Survivor Leader Advisory Council and has brought dozens and dozens of survivors to the coalition. And during the pandemic, when so many things have had to shut down and awareness efforts have changed, we have increased the numbers of survivors who are speaking on topics from labor trafficking, sex trafficking, from the trafficking of boys and men, the trafficking of those who have experienced child abuse in the past, and how life after trafficking is still so difficult. It's not recovery and then life is good. It's certainly, as Gina explained, it's a life sentence. And Gina has brought so many people along on the journey to share that with everybody, because then we are more motivated to understand that ultimately we must not let this start in the first place. We have to also be very focused on prevention. We see in that same respectful vein that this is a learning journey for all of us. So for those who've been with the coalition from its founding, and there are so many, we still evolve and learn and listen to survivors to help us learn. And that has been a very inspiring way to take our message forward, be it from losing imagery and not trying to sensationalize this topic, but understand the root causes and how so many people can be affected by it, not trying to categorize one group over another, recognizing that trafficking can affect everyone, but anyone can help end it. We also are responsive. So you heard from Stephen, we have 15 committees, and we adapt our programming when we listen to the committee members, and people join these committees from sometimes just from a passion, sometimes they are experts, or sometimes they have a professional background in something. For example, bankers, we have a new bank awareness committee, and banking is incredibly important because trafficking is a financial crime. People are exploiting others for financial gain. And so the Bank Awareness Committee can help teach other bankers to recognize the signs of money laundering and other things that could deal with that. We invite people in as members of our Arts Committee. Danny represents our Education Committee. We have an extraordinary Healthcare Committee. And I do draw your attention to our website. I know Stephen's put that into the chat, and you can look out for an extraordinary new PSA. It's actually a short film on healthcare, trafficking in healthcare, and how healthcare professionals can recognize some of the signs, some of the sort of general signs of trafficking that they may come across and how they should respond to that. We recently put out a PSA on labor trafficking. So we are learning constantly. And Gina, I always say thank you for taking us by the hand so carefully and gently on that learning journey. But we're relatable, and we try to be open to all. We try to share a message of safety. This is not a message that we're sharing that is supposed to scare people, but just recognize that you need to understand what human trafficking is as much as you need to understand how to safely cross a road. We learn how to do that as children, and children need to learn what the ways are to safely negotiate their world, the real world, the virtual world, so that they can both protect themselves, their families and friends, and also be the change makers, those that will look out for others in our communities who maybe haven't the ability in that moment to be the survivor leaders that Gina and so many others are, but will one day, we hope, be in that space. So I didn't want to spend too much time talking about the coalition in a lot of detail. There are so many volunteers. I shout out to them for their passion, but we will have, a lot of Q&A. So I'm going to turn it back to you now, Stephen. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Kate. And thank you for all our panelists. And we finished just within an hour, which gives us plenty of time for Q&A. And first, let me go back to Penny. One of the first questions was whether Rutgers, whether the program has interns. And if so, is there a screening process for the interns? Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, we do have interns. I mean, I think interns, the program is fairly new. And one of the benefits of being an intern in the program is you not only work with experienced professionals, faculty members, administrators of the university, you also work with students, right? And students who are learning, so the interns would learn alongside our students. So if anyone is interested in interning with us, I put my email address in the chat. You can just reach out to me and just send me, a cover letter and a resume, and somebody will get back to you, probably me. And because we have a number of different departments, we have 10 different departments that are engaged in this program, you don't have to be someone who is a legal intern. You can be someone who is perhaps interested in going to medical school, or someone who's interested in going to social work school, or someone who's in social work school somewhere else, not at Rutgers. So it's, there are many, many ways of learning. And another beauty of the program is the interdisciplinary nature. We can't solve human trafficking alone. And the coalition, as you heard from many people, really reflects that. We have professionals from a number of different disciplines, people who are interested in certain topics. And together we've created something really beautiful and really cutting edge. And the same goes for this, this program. It is interdepartmental, it's interdisciplinary, and there's room for expansion. If we find that we need certain services that the project is not offering, then we will expand in that area. And so please feel free to send me your information.
Thank you, Penny. So just leading off from that, can Kate or Danny expand a little bit more about our intern program, how they're selected and how they're screened, and the work that they do with us? If either one of you can spend a little more time on that.
Sure, I can share a little bit about that. So we have a unique program. It only happens in the winter. And that is because we are a fully volunteer-run organization. So as many fully volunteer-run organizations exist, we don't have the capacity to have summer interns, but we do promote this peer-led program in the winter. So this is when college students are typically on winter break. And just so happens that in the United States, our month for Prevention Month and Awareness Day is in January. So it kind of sort of made it natural that it would be a possibility to have this short-term intensive team internship program that existed and started just as the students came off of onto winter break, and then it runs through. They spend these intense few weeks planning their own Awareness Day event. So they plan an event for January 11th every year, and we have seen just this most extraordinary types of events that they've done. They've been online, I suppose, most of the time. The first few were probably recorded and we put them on Facebook, but during the pandemic, they've been incredibly innovative. Last year, there was an event where they recreated a game that is very popular with young people called The Imposter Among Us. And then there was an imposter in the Imposter Among Us game, and how that they showed literally how somebody could go into a game, build camaraderie with a player, take them into a encrypted chat space. It could be anything from WhatsApp to one of the other spaces, and then begin the luring process. So that it's wonderful to sort of, if you like, hand over to young people to be peer-led this program, because then you really get new ideas. We're not trying to sort of, I said we were trying to be responsive. We want to listen to what people think are going to be effective methods, and there's always something great and new. So that's what our program looks like. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Kate. And I also want to expand on that, and that Kate and I, as co-chairs of the Operating Council, we're always encouraging people to step forward into leadership roles. And the interns have, many of them have, as Danny said, have stepped forward into those roles, and it's great. We had a competition a few months ago to see who was the newest member of the legislative committee, and many of them were on the committee for less than a year, and many of them had just joined us as interns. We're always looking for new people with fresh ideas. Kate and I and Danny do not have all the answers, and we don't want to have all the answers. We're looking for new people to come in with fresh ideas, shake us up, rattle us, do something to get us to look in different ways at how we can address this scourge. Another question came out in following about Penny's program, and possibly with Jessica, what she was talking about as well, about how actions for these victims and survivors are trauma informed and responsive. And so I'd like Penny to start responding to that, about how her Rutgers program, the Pre-Arrest Diversion program, is trauma informed. And I'd invite Jessica to respond as well, and then anybody else to talk about what the training that we actually do for people who are members of the coalition, and particularly for our Speakers Bureau, the training that is to be trauma informed and survivor informed. So if I can ask Penny to first respond.
Sure. As you know, our program is run out of Rutgers University, and you have world-class experts who have studied, different methodologies of being trauma informed, and who teach it to students who are getting both undergraduate degrees and graduate degrees. So the experts who are running the different branches of our program are experts in trauma-informed service providing. So again, I am the legal branch of this program, and it stems from the law school. But I know that I don't know the first thing about mental health administration, and that is administered by people who have expertise in this area. Having said that, when we put together training programs for people in the community, people for law enforcement, we're putting together a training program for law enforcement. It is the program and the materials are being put together by people who are steeped in providing services through a trauma-informed and a survivor-informed lens. We at the law school have actually received training from those members of our program so that we can administer legal services in a trauma-informed way, so that we can understand, sort of the psychological needs and other needs of people who are have suffered severe trauma and who are survivors. Like others have said, we are constantly learning, and again, constantly learning, constantly evaluating. We want to be the best. We want to be the most effective, the most efficient. And that's our goal. Our goal is to help survivors and victims of human trafficking. And part of that is constantly looking within and trying to improve and be better.
And I would add, I think that, first of all, I appreciate the question so much, because I do think it's important to recognize that the work doesn't matter if we don't do it right. I'll always think back to one of the first survivors I ever worked with on criminal record clearing. It actually wasn't a vacatur petition. That doesn't really matter. The work was the same. We were asking her to tell us some of the most difficult things that had ever happened to her in very painful detail. And at the end, she looked and said, you all sit here and you ask these questions and you open all of this up, but you're in no position to close me back up when we're done. And she wasn't saying it in an accusatory fashion. She was just making the point. And it was such a good reminder for us that, first of all, we do have to stay in our lane. I'm not a social worker. I'm not a therapist. It would be unethical and bad for me to try and provide those services. But it's really important that I recognize that those services are needed, and to offer to make connections, to know where we can try and connect people to, and to know that part of this work, and I think one of the things that I love about criminal record clearing is that it is survivor focused, and it is really on a survivor's time frame for when they want to move forward and how they want to move forward. And it can be and should be an empowering opportunity for a survivor to reclaim some of that narrative, but only if we are giving the survivor the power to sort of make the big decisions. And that's hard for lawyers. We're used to being the ones who know the things and make the decisions. And I think making sure that we are thinking through how to do it well, knowing that there's no one size fits all, right? What one survivor is going to find helpful and effective is not the same for another, right? Everyone's different. We're all different. All the lawyers are different. All the survivors are different. And so just being open, as Penny said, to learning and to constantly making sure that we're thinking through what we're doing, but to really recognize, and I start every first interaction with a survivor by saying, you're in charge. If I ask a question you don't like, I want you to tell me. If you don't want to answer a question, I want you to tell me. My job is to present what I think we need to do, but it's ultimately to do what the survivor thinks is best. And so I think that there's always room to learn, but this is why things like the Rutgers approach is so exciting to me, because we do our best work as lawyers when we are connected with the other professionals who can fill in the other gaps. And so when New Jersey is at its strongest, and this is going to be true in every community, is when we are connected with each other. And when we know that where our work ends, somebody else's work needs to begin, and to be able to make a warm handoff so that we aren't treating people as hot potatoes and being like, well, we're done, and that's not my thing. When we can work together, and this is true for all of my clients, when I'm doing immigration work, when I'm doing criminal record clearing work, I am at my best as a lawyer when my clients have connections to other really strong services.
So I want to just add, thank you, Jessica, that was great. I want to add one more thing, which is, the training of the next generation. So I've been working with Jessica on a matter that will, hopefully we're going to be one of those people who's going to file a petition on June 1st when the New Jersey law goes into effect. We got this client from Jessica, and before my students even met our client, we spent a good month and a half learning about trauma-informed interviewing process, the students learning not only the law, but also ways to talk to someone who has been through severe trauma. We had several meetings with Jessica where we, discussed with her some of the questions that we had about our potential client. And it really, again, you may say, wow, that takes a long time. You could be spending it helping someone, but we really can't help someone unless we actually know how to do it. And for students, they're trained how to do it, and they're trained how to do it right. So when they go out to practice, and I'm again speaking about my law students, even if they go to practice in a law firm or work in commercial, in the commercial sector rather than the public sector, and they want to do volunteer work through the coalition, through Jessica's organization, through the university, they will know how to do it. They will know how to do it right. And again, it's really, really critical. And they, when they become senior members of their legal organizations, can train others to do it, to do it correctly, to actually show the person that we're interviewing respect, give them agency. And we developed a very, very strong level of trust with our client, and she was able to give us information that other legal organizations actually were not able to get from her. And one of the things that we, sort of was the mantra from day one that we, sort of worked out with Jessica is whenever the client is done talking for the day, that's it. Even if we've been on the phone for 3 minutes, if she does not want to speak, that's it, fine. We'll make another appointment. Now it requires great flexibility on our part, but these cases are, are hard. And I always bring the students back to sort of trying to put themselves in the, in the shoes of the person who's been trafficked. Anyway, I just wanted to add that to what Jessica said.
Thank you so much, Penny. I would also add, I'm glad that you mentioned that even if your students go on to do commercial work, I want to let you know that I worked for one of these big law firms that did a pro bono pilot project in Queens for the Human Trafficking Intervention Court. And, they did commercial law. I was doing RMBS cases, and they were all trained on how to work with survivors and victims. And we had some training in being trauma informed and all that. So I'm glad they're getting that training with you now, and they certainly can apply it later when they do pro bono work. That's so important. At this time, I actually want to go to Gina to hear from her what she thinks from a survivor perspective, what others who are not survivors should know, especially when they're interacting with survivors. Gina?
Stephen. So I think it's important that we know that from a survivor's lens, from our perspective, that we are more than our stories. And there's many more survivors that aren't willing to share their stories, because what happens is we're looked at only for our stories, and we are more than what happened to us. And many people also say, like, how do you speak to survivors? You speak to them like anyone else. You speak to them like human beings. What happened to us was not our fault. In fact, it takes survivors a lot of work to even self-identify that, yes, I was a victim, to differentiate between being a survivor and being a victim being we're still in the life, and a survivor, we're out of the life. But it doesn't end there, because as Penny and Jessica and everyone stated earlier, there are so many needs that are being unattended to, between being strapped and suffocated with the criminal records and the healthcare needs, and having to address our trauma. But you will learn that many survivors don't even realize they're survivors because they weren't able to identify as a victim, because we were taught that everything that happened to us was our fault. Everything that happened to us, we had coming to us. And plus, if we said anything, it becomes this big dark secret that many survivors today still are unable to get the help that they need, because they struggle with the shame and the fear. And this is why it's so important to have in these open conversations, so that they're able to get that care, to be able to get that, whether it's going to counseling, which is so intricate, and you can never stop going to counseling. I remember I started at going 3 times a week, and now it's like a maintenance thing that we all need. We need the community. We need the mentorship. We need all of you. Survivors cannot do it without all of you. And I think it's just so important that we just treat others with kindness, dignity, and respect, because we don't know the stories behind everyone else. But once a survivor is able to self-identify, and that comes with healing, and it comes with sharing our stories, it really is helpful, because as a coalition, when we go out and we have the Speakers Bureau go out and educate about what is human trafficking, and students or healthcare, law enforcement, whoever that audience may be, is hearing from the speakers and hearing what this is. You never know who you're affecting in the audience that said, oh, wow, that happened to me. And it just takes like one click. I remember as a survivor, many times I go out and there's always someone that says that happened to me. And the youngest was 10 years old and the oldest was 76 years old, and said, you're the first person I'm telling this to. And it's a shock for them. They're being traumatized because they're hearing something. And even though we address our presentation depending on who the audience is, because you want to make sure everything we do as a coalition is age appropriate according to that audience, which does take a lot of work to be mindful about that. So we all have different lived experience, but it's important that what we do as a coalition, which I totally love, even though I'm the survivor consultant, it's not just about my lived experience. We wouldn't be able to grow if it was just about Gina's lived experience. And this is what a lot of organizations sometimes become stuck with. They'll hear from just a few survivors and they'll just continue to use those few survivors. And that's not how we learn. It's so important that we bring in as many voices, invite as many voices to the table. And when we talk about being inclusive, inclusive does mean bringing a survivor in from the very beginning. When you bring a survivor in from the beginning, you're automatically a survivor inclusive, led and informed organization. And we need to include the guys, we need to include the girls, we need to include the LGBTQ community, because although our pain is the same, the stories are also different. And so this is something that I have passionately love and respect about the coalition, is that they do all of the above. They hear all of us. And when you bring survivors on, even though it doesn't get easier, you are giving them a platform. It is empowering. You're healing them. You're seeing them. And it does make their story, it gives their story and what happened to them. It makes them feel that that story doesn't have that kind of power that they went through. It's less empowering. And that's what we want to do. And that's part of the healing journey. But it's so important that we don't use survivors as tokens. Don't just bring a survivor in. Oh, by the way, we put this form together, or by the way, we decided we're going to have this event and this is what we're going to talk about. That's re-exploiting and using them as tokens. You want to make them part of the journey, part of the conversation, part of everything we do. And this is what I absolutely recognize about all of you. And that's why I choose to walk alongside of all of you, because you're doing it, and you're doing it with the utmost respect, and you're doing it correctly. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all the questions. We had one other question related to Ukraine. And obviously from news reports, because of their extremely vulnerable population, we have over 2 million people who are refugees and are fleeing the country, and they're very vulnerable. And so there are reports already of some of them possibly being groomed or being recruited and exploited. And so I was wondering if anybody on the panel wanted to comment on that and about how people are vulnerable and how their vulnerabilities make them subject to being trafficked.
I would just say that I think it's important to recognize that vulnerability is always the piece with someone being susceptible to trafficking. And so as always, I think supporting the communities that are the most vulnerable to ensure that they have access to basic necessities is probably the most important first step. I worry sometimes that trafficking gets exploited for political reasons, which I would just say happens in all contexts, but especially now. And so we want to be really careful not to further that, and recognize that people who are fleeing conflict are always more vulnerable to a whole host of exploitations. And so the best way that we can prevent that right now, especially in the immediate sense, is to, support the organizations on the ground that are keeping people housed, that are keeping people fed, and that are keeping people safe. And I'm certain that there will be time to talk specifically about where trafficking plays into that. But I think right now, when you have over 2 million people fleeing a country in a matter of days, it's really about keeping everyone as safe as possible, first and foremost.
Thank you, Jessica. Anybody else wish to comment on that? I do want to note that I just got a notice from the International Court of Justice that they will be announcing their decision on Ukraine's application for provisional measures concerning the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. So we'll be hearing about that on Wednesday, not specifically about human trafficking, but certainly having an impact on those who live there, and making it much more vulnerable situation for them. Anybody else wish to make a final comment on Ukraine and vulnerabilities? Okay, well, we are almost to the end of our time here, and I really wanted to thank all of the panelists, and I wanted to thank all of our attendees. At one point, we had over 80 attendees. Right now, we have 70. We're not able to see at this point from what we're looking at now exactly where you were watching from, but we're delighted so many people from around the world chose to watch our program, and we were so honored and delighted to do this. And this is our first parallel event for this NGO forum. We're so proud to be a part of this, but we hope that this was informative and useful for you. We've left you ways to reach out to us if you want to have a discussion offline, if you want to volunteer or share information with us. We certainly want to be able to share the information to as many people as possible. We sincerely believe that what we're developing here can be used anywhere. And so even though it may be unique to us right now, the point of our doing this was to allow us to speak to you about what we are doing here. We don't have all the answers, but we have some unique challenges that we're facing here and some unique responses to those challenges. And we want to share that with you. And we believe that they can be shared anywhere in the world. So we want to be able to have that discussion with you. We invite you to contact us and we look forward to hearing from you. And so does anybody else have anything that they wish to say at this time? Any of our panelists? Well, thank you again so much, and we will close this session. Again, the recording will be available on our website and our YouTube channel. Thank you everyone for being here, and enjoy the rest of the forum. Have a good day.